Hey everybody, this is Dr. Littlefield, and I'm going to get you started on your capstone research topic as a refresher from what you've learned from OLM 503. During this brief video, we're going to talk about research topics and how to identify one, purpose statements and how to write one, research methodologies and deciding on which would be best for you, and how to write certain research questions. So let's start with talking about the identification of your research problem. Think back to what you wrote about in 503, as well as along the program, the OLM program, about different topics that you may have written about. What is the problem that you're researching? Ask yourself, why does it matter, and who may benefit from the research? If you're struggling with answering these two questions about who may benefit and why does it matter, you probably don't have the best topic. Think about your experience. Is there something in your work environment that would be worthy of your research? Think about your personal life. Is there something in your community that would be worthy of your research? And then also think about who your audience may be. If you have the plan to utilize your capstone research as a way to propel your career, think certainly about who your audience may be. Or if you want to implement something upon the completion of your study, think about who it is that this would be presented to. One of the most important things to remember is that the research design is determined after you've come up with your topic. After you've identified what the problem is, then you figure out the research design. So let's get started with figuring out your topic. Ask yourself a bunch of these questions. What's interesting to you? Is there a phenomenon that's happening that you've noticed? Or what about issues that you've noticed in your workplace? Something that needs to be fixed, perhaps, or implemented? Maybe there's a problem with a population whose voice has been silenced, or maybe they've been marginalized. Is it a real problem? What is the real problem? And what can you do about it? One of the most important things to remember is that your research topic has to be approached from the lens of the organization or through the eyes of leadership. Once you think you have your research topic, jot down some ideas of what the title may be. Once you have that, that helps you narrow your focus. So now you can start thinking about what the purpose of the research is. So writing your purpose statement. Your research purpose statement is by far the most important sentence in your entire capstone proposal document and in your entire capstone research document. The purpose statement, when it's well defined, well clarified, it serves as the backbone to your research. It has to include the words, or it should include the words, the purpose of this research is to, and then continue on with the words of explore, or examine, or identify. Make sure that it has the leadership focus. That's one of the most important things to get your topic all the way through. A review of the research methods that you heard in 503, if you remember right, there were three different types of research methods. There was the qualitative, the quantitative, and the mixed methods. And if you remember, the qualitative with the L, that is for the language, which means that it's about the written word, it's about the rich dialogue, that text. Data from qualitative is things in the form of words or pictures. Qualitative research is inductive, which means that it's the process of arriving at a conclusion based upon the data. So you get the data and then you get the conclusion. Something that's very important is that a qualitative research study, that the researcher discloses any biases, any values or experiences that may impact the interpretation of the results. What this means is that if you work for the organization in which you do your study, that's fine. You just need to tell us about it. Tell us about it in the written portion of your document. That way the reader knows how you are so familiar with it. Different ways of collecting data in qualitative research would include interviews, whether they are structured interviews, whether they're semi-structured interviews, whether they are focus group interviews. Could be observations, and it also could be content analysis. Something indicative of qualitative research is that the design emerges as the study unfolds. You'll understand what that means when you see what quantitative design does. So the quantitative research. Remember the N, remember numbers. So quantitative is in the form of numbers and statistics. It's deductive, which means that you make conclusions based on your previously known facts. So it's kind of opposite of qualitative. Research documents result in using objective language And then the researcher fully designs every single aspect of the study prior to starting data collection. This is the difference between quantitative and qualitative research. And then of course you have mixed methods, and as the name implies, it's a mixture. It's a mixture of qualitative and quantitative. Some of the readings that you should consider reviewing would include from the textbook, the Creswell textbook, chapters 8, 9, and 10 on quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods research. If you purchase the optional text, the Erickson and Colevian, there's an entire section, part 2, on methods of qualitative research in business. And then in doc sharing, there's a document called 5 Approaches to Qualitative Inquiry, and that's by Creswell. Now I want you to think about research questions, and are they the same as interview questions or survey questions? And I hope at this point you're shaking your head no, because they are not the same. Just like the apples in this image, the red apple is different from the green apples. Research questions are different from interview and survey questions. It may take as many as 3 or so, perhaps more, interview or survey questions to actually collect enough data to answer a research question. Some examples and some things to know about qualitative research questions. Under no certain terms should your research question result in a yes or no answer. You also should not write a question that is going to lead your participants into a certain answer that you're looking for. Don't let the question convey the conclusions that you're expecting. Qualitative research questions begin with how or what. Avoid the why. The why implies cause and effect, and that lines up with quantitative research. Your research questions are also going to identify the participants and the research site. Keep in mind that it does not identify them by name, but rather in general terms. So participants might be identified as students or faculty, and a research site might be identified as a 4-year nonprofit institution in the greater northeastern region of the United States. But you do not identify them by name. Some examples of qualitative research questions. You could use this format and fill in the parentheses. So here's an example of one. What is the role of store managers in employee satisfaction of hourly workers at large retail department stores? Or maybe if your study is asking about this topic, a research question could be, what is the process of a search committee in making decisions about a new company president? And here's another idea. How does the president's leadership style impact employee engagement at public colleges and universities? So on the flip side, you've got quantitative research questions. These begin with how, what, or why. Again, there's never going to be a research question that answers with a yes or no. And here's where you're going to get into your independent and dependent variables. Again, when writing one, you're going to fill in the little parentheses. So here's an example. How does quarterly sales volume relate to employee morale for the Hispanic American hourly workers? Or maybe a research question is, how do African American 10th grade females and white non-Hispanic 10th grade females compare in their plans for post-secondary education? So what I want you to do is ask yourself, what do you need to know, and how will you achieve this purpose? Are there other questions that you need to be answering? Well, what if these questions that you're listing are outside of the realm of the purpose statement? Then you shouldn't be using them. And the biggest question is, if I answer all of these questions, will I achieve the purpose of your research? And here's something to keep in mind, is that your research questions are not always the same as your interview or survey questions. Your survey and interview questions are going to be grouped directly to a research question, and if you cannot directly relate it to a research question, you should not be asking it, with the exception of demographic information. So if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please contact me or the instructor if we're not one and the same, and take a look in your textbooks, take a look at your readings, and see if you can figure that out. If you do have any questions, just feel free to let us know. So thank you, and good luck with your research.